welcome back to Shadowcast. We got a big one today. Date 4, the money date, the big one, right? The only one after sex that everybody seems to have been waiting for. So, pretty exciting stuff. Are you excited about it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Nice. So this is the John and Julie Gottman, right? That's their names.
John and Julie Gottman wrote the book 8 Dates, 8 conversations you should have either before sex or before entering into a long-term relationship to make sure you're on the same page.
And better advice has never been given. Right?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, so many people don't talk about these big topics until they hit a big argument. And then that's not the best time to be talking about it.
Right. Or you spend all of your initial dates in rose-colored glass land going, he wants kids and I want kids.
He's perfect.
He's 6'4" and he makes more than $700,000 a year. Anyway, whatever. But you get what I'm saying is it's very easy at the very beginning of a relationship.
Oh, but he's $500,000 in debt? And he wants to quit work and become a musician?
He's got a novel he wants to write.
Yeah, no big surprises like that.
Well, those are the things you got to get out of the way, and I think so. There's a series of questions that these folks have come up with that obviously are just meant to be guidelines. You can ask your own questions, but to make sure you're thinking well-roundedly in sense of what to ask. The first question they suggest, which is going back, it's pretty interesting to follow it back. But I think it paints I really have grown to appreciate these first 2 questions more than I necessarily did before. What did your maternal and paternal grandparents do for a living? Phenomenal question, because I never would have dawned on me to ask what your grandparents did for a living early in a relationship or when you were getting serious about a relationship, but it really is the sort of origin point. Obviously they learned things from theirs, but for you it's sort of like the real role model grandparent and parents are the most influential people often in our lives.
Your family's financial legacy, I guess.
Yeah, in terms of how you think about money. And so what did your maternal grandparents do for a living?
So to put this in perspective, if we were a couple, trying to, pursue this relationship, we would go on a date, and it would be someplace where it's quiet and minimal amount of alcohol and
non-judgmental
philosophy. And good kind of communication skills, and then just flesh all this out. I'm afraid I don't have a lot to contribute to this. I actually only met one of my grandparents, and my parents didn't talk about them much. I met my mother's father when he was dying of cancer. I don't think any of my grandparents had any substantial way to make a good living. I've seen pictures of how my father grew up, like dirt poor in Tennessee, like this shack with, literally dirt in the yard and stuff. So everybody grew up poor. I think they just did whatever they could. So there wasn't any real sense of a occupation that was passed down. Certainly not money passed down. I don't think any of my parents inherited any money of any sort. Didn't inherit a house or whatever. So it was a pretty a legacy of poverty, I guess I'd say.
Really, very interesting not to know them even like that.
Yeah.
Where, like on my side of it,
they were dead before I was born.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. On my side of it, like my mother's side, my grandmothers and grandfather started the first non-alcoholic dance hall in Ireland.
That's great.
Wonderful, wonderful thing. And my grandfather was a gentleman farmer, human rights advocate, lawyer, amazing guy, and my grandmother ran the dance hall and raised 12 kids and ran a farm, right? A sheep farm.
Any of those 3 is a full-time job.
Yeah. 'Yeah. And then on my father's side, Italian side of the family, My grandfather was a carpenter and did a lot of carpentry work.
Why the quotes?
Because that's, that was the story in the family for a lot of years. And my family was, oh, your grandfather's a carpenter. Oh, really? And he why? How does he always drive such a nice car? They live in this huge fucking house. Like I never understood as a young kid, like carpenter must be a great fucking job.
That's what I'm going to do when I grow up.
Yeah, my grandfather, and he definitely liked to do woodwork.
And do you want to disclose what?
Well, they were clearly involved in, some illegal something. And my great grandmother had made a fortune during Prohibition, bringing grapes in on. On my Irish side, imagine my grandparents are against alcohol entirely. And because they've seen how it ruins Ireland, and in the same time,
But they had nothing to do with alcohol. It was only grapes.
my grandparents.
We can all rationalize, can't we?
So both sides very wealthy, right? Both sides had a lot of money and came from money and had a lot of money, and they did things based on money. Right, so
but your mom's side had a certain amount of money, right?
A lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your dad's side, tons of money.
My dad's had a lot of money, but for Ireland at that time, my Irish grandparents immigrated to the United States, and they worked for my dad. My grandfather on that side drove a subway in New York City for something like 12 years, and this is way back because they were much older, and even when my mom was born, they were already much older. So it was Depression era, and right before that big stock market crash, the woman that my grandmother was working for, she'd been she was a stock agent. The husband was a stockbroker, and they told my grandmother to take all the money they had and buy and short the stocks, and it turned my Irish grandparents into overnight millionaires. They just made because they totally trusted these people, and they turned them into millionaires. And then they just left New York, went back to Ireland, bought this huge farm, and started the non-alcoholic dance hall. They were very wealthy. So that was how my grandparents grew up, and how I got to sort of, I think, had a real effect on my parents, obviously, Which is the next question: what did your parents do for a living?
My father was a meat cutter.
A butcher?
Butcher. Well, meat cutter like in a
factory.
In Safeways, kind of a thing.
I think that's still a legit butcher.
Yeah, but not well, I guess later on he would work for the ranchers in the small town in Oregon and all that. He started his own business after that.
Nice.
But, he was basically uneducated. I think he had maybe an 8th grade education or something like that. But he did go to business school for a couple of years and learned a lot of stuff like that. And he was super hardworking, and probably worked more hours per day over his whole life than probably was healthy. But he liked it. My mother was a housewife. My father got her pregnant 17, and then he went off to the Korean War. So she became a housewife, but she wasn't really trained in it. She couldn't really cook or anything. She was pretty bad. And they divorced when I was young. But yeah, she later on, when she had to make a living on her own, went to work at a bank, and she loved it. She loved money, and was kind of a wannabe rich person, would, read about rich people and watch things on TV about rich people and dream and, liked knowing the fancy words for things and all that kind of stuff. So she loved working at the bank and working with money and all that kind of stuff.
And she worked at a bank?
Yeah, she was a teller.
Nice. But, very nice. On my side, my mom and dad were both very entrepreneurial. So they always both had jobs, and sometimes they both worked in the business that was the family business, and at other times if that business was just starting or not doing well, then always my mother would go take a job somewhere else and do accounting.
So this is interesting. Your parents worked together, and it sounds like worked together well. No? But you and your wife work together is my point.
Yeah.
I mean, not too many couples think about working together, and even fewer do it well.
Yeah, I mean, we have our occasional disagreement. Actually, we had a disagreement today about it, and neither of us shouts, but it doesn't even, because you're so accustomed to the other person, even though you don't shout, doesn't mean your feelings aren't hurt.
Sure.
And but
most of the time, you guys work really well together, it seems.
Yeah, very, very effective. And my mom and dad, they would have endless fucking arguments about
money,
about the business, about money.
Okay.
Not necessarily about. Well, my dad was just a completely reckless. He was the visionary of the business, to be sure. Mm-hmm. And my mom was much more grounded in terms of like sort of managing the finances and seeing how we were doing and
keeping him in check if his dreams got too big.
She'd hound my dad if things weren't doing well enough, and my dad though both of them were very dedicated to whatever business they had. They certainly worked hard at whatever business they had and did a lot to be able to build it. So they owned a chain of video stores for many years, and then the profits that they made from that they turned into owning real estate and being,
for the millennials watching, you used to have to go to a short store to get a movie.
Yeah, bring it back.
Bring it back.
Yeah,
and get it back on time or pay a late fee.
Yeah.
We forgot to cheer.
Hey, to you and your relationship, may whoever it is that you're going on date for turn out to be the one for you.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah. So, but I would say the same thing. Complete workaholics. Total lack of like work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Always prioritized making money as the most important thing, and that's how they definitely were. So, question 3: how well off were your parents?
When I think my father left when I was in 3rd grade. When he was there, I think we were like lower middle class. We had a very small house, but he had a little money here and there, and he did some remodeling of the garage and made it into a family room. I mean, like, that was a big deal for us. Not a lot of money to like go out and eat very often, any of that sort of thing, but we did okay, and he always made sure we had meat to eat and all that sort of thing. But after he left, it was super poverty. The most difficult thing for me was watching my mom sit at the kitchen table at night with bills spread out all over the table, just trying to figure out which one she could pay. She'd send us down to what was called the little store, because we didn't have a car, to, with maybe $10 to buy, some white bread and a few groceries from just the little tienda down there. Mm-hmm. But the worst thing for me was that we didn't have a phone. And so I'm in grade school, and people are trying to make friends with me, and they're like, call me. And I would just make excuses because I was very embarrassed. So we were extremely poor.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. So my parents were, looking back, they were very well off. They had a lot of money. They made a lot of money. They inherited a lot of money. And they had invested the money incredibly well, and so my dad was really good at building, and very good at preparing a house for a rental. He was great at it, and he just putter, but he could putter because they were like he's very financially sound in some ways. So he puttered, but then as they got older, he didn't even want to work anymore, and so rather than take the pay cut and hire somebody to do the job, he just sort of neglected the apartments, and it created some headaches for them later in their life that definitely could have been avoided. And I think my dad, it was never enough. My dad was one of those guys where, like, the second he had the money for a down payment on another house, bam, that house was bought. And he had his eye on several before he even had the money, just like burning a hole in him.
So he wanted to be a real estate mogul.
Yeah, and it was like the thrill of the hunt, and there'd always be a big dinner and a family celebration when a new house got acquired or apartment building or whatever. And they for many, many years growing up, they lived actually below their means. And then, I'm not sure what happened, but at some point they started trying to live above their means.
They realized they were going to die.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm mortal.
Yeah, that could be. What were your parents' attitudes about money, and how did you view those parental ideas as a child? See, I can imagine how incredible important this is to how two people will relate. I think it's fascinating, right?
Well, and I think the Gottmans don't like to split people into savers and spenders. I think those are like value-laden judgments and things like that, whereas other people we might talk about today, like Dave Ramsey, does split people into that kind of thing. But I think both of my parents had the mental attitudes that, be frugal, save money, work hard. My mom had no idea about investment, I don't think, but my father, especially later in his life, made some decent investment. He got a tip about investing in fiber optics. He didn't even know what the hell that was, but that paid off for him. So I think they were conservative, financially conservative and frugal.
Both
of them, yeah.
So very interesting. So we're on my side, my mom was an accountant. Everything had to be just so, right? Never wanted to spend money ever. Only wanted to see the accounts grow. And my dad was like the exact opposite, right? So my father was, gotta spend money to make money, and gotta if you have to burn through it, but you gotta get her done.
No risk, no gain.
Yeah, and really, I mean, it just always paid off for him. So my childhood attitudes.
But he didn't want to spend on making repairs on those apartments. He wanted to spend on the things he wanted to spend on, and in that particular thing, seems a little cheap to not want to. I should disqualify
it because it was like the last years of their lives, and that probably is not an accurate reflection.
Okay.
But for many, many years, they ran a very successful real estate business and small chain of video stores. Before that, a small chain of hairdressing salons.
That's right. You told me today he was a hairdresser.
Yeah, and in Ireland, had a very successful chain of hairdressing salons.
Bit of a jack of all trades.
Well, a real entrepreneur, so he could see an opportunity and just go for it. And he would always find a way to make it work out. And I think definitely one of those things that I inherited from my father was that, like, don't ignore it, but don't worry about it, right? Be aware of it, but at the same time, have the confidence that you're going to find a solution.
And like your father, you can see an opportunity. And I don't know what kind of an idea man he was, but you're a great idea man.
Well, I'm definitely a better idea man. But my father was a much better businessman. He was just much more
grounded.
Yeah, maybe just he just had
Practical.
something about him that he just could, right? Just like success after success after success. Whereas I hit failure after failure after failure and a success, and a failure and a failure and a failure and a success. Like I might I might bat a 50, even.
I
But
think you're like a really good guy for like being first to market with the first idea and hitting it when it's hot, and then getting out when you've kind of played that out.
yeah. I mean, because I think for me, I having watched my parents work themselves to the bone, I reprioritized my life to say, you know what, like I want to work in things that I don't want to have the same job for 20 years.
Right.
I want to work in something, I want to make some money doing it, and then have a bunch of time off to be with my family or do what I care about. And because, like the one thing for sure, I grew up with money as being more important than your emotional health, right? Like money is more important than how
that was a trend of the times,
Yeah, how you feel. And I think we now almost live in a world that mandates that, but I think,
But I think we're farther from those generations that went through the Depression and really had to scrape and use that little piece of string, or use that, make that can of tuna feed 6 people.
But I would say that those are entirely different things, because one of the most significant relationships I had in my life was with a woman much older than myself, and her parents were alive and had lived through the Depression. And he was a doctor, incredibly successful doctor in Pittsford, just outside of Rochester. Had this house worth millions and millions of dollars. Like, I forget how many 1,000 feet of canal front in Pittsford this place had, but it was a lot. And, he was making 6 figures back in the 60s, right? And had made that and more every year. They had tens of millions of dollars. Yet, when you went into their house, they had tin cans hammered one at a time into stacks of 10 that were then tied together with papers and stored as tin. And then they would take the newspapers.
It's going to be worth something someday.
Just because they had lived through a time when they had nothing.
That changed people's mindset and their emotions.
But what I found being around them was they spent money on fucking nothing. Like, it was... they spent money when they absolutely had to. And when they had to, they would buy the best quality, so they never had to buy it again.
So it'll last.
But they didn't spend money. They were not the typical consumer, right? They spend money on nothing. Whereas
that's what I'm saying. It messes with your mind.
This other generation that came up, like my parents, how I view my parents, more my father, was they grew up in a generation where they started caring about sort of showing off compared to the neighbors and trying to be like, keeping up with the Joneses, as the old saying goes, and buying things just to like have a new car, and buy a new car just like, for what? What was wrong with the old car? And even though they would neither of them would ever say it, it was always like a chain event that happened on the street, right? And so I from an early age was like, oh, you guys are just trying to...
I think it always happens that way. You either go the same direction as your parents, or you go the opposite. Just like if there's like abuse in the family,
right.
The guy's beating his wife, maybe the son starts beating his wife, or he says, I'm never going to be like my father. I'm going to be completely opposite, It's kind of no middle ground.
It's very black and white, isn't it? So, did your parents feel comfortable spending money, and how did you view these attitudes about money as a child?
Not comfortable spending money, I don't think. It was more of a special occasion thing when you did anything special. And like I say, we never went out to eat. Almost never. Stuff like that.
And my parents would regularly spend money. My mom's much more conservative, but my dad, because he always had hustles going, for lack of a better word. He always had some other little doodad he was doing, you know. He'd make a couple $1,000s or whatever doing whatever he was doing. And then there were always these sort of celebrations that always happened. So I think also my parents would buy things to compensate for the fact that they were never really around. So I got plenty of stuff bought for me. You know what I mean? Like, for most of my childhood, I never even really appreciated the life that other kids had because I felt like I never wanted for anything. You know?
Actually, I forgot about this. There was this period right before my dad left, and I think it was under the influence of Uncle Wally, who was kind of the black sheep of the family and was always into some sort of illegal something or whatever.
Wow.
I think he got my dad involved in some of that stuff. That's when my dad and him went in and bought a bar. And then some different things started happening, and so there were some new cars bought and things like that. But then later on, there was the guy that, you know, when you're a kid, you think, this stuff can happen? I never thought that this could happen. A guy comes and hooks a thing onto the car, tows the car off, you know. So, our family station wagon. So
it gets hauled off.
Easy come, easy go, I guess.
Nice. Well, you know, I just
Fantastic.
to stop in the middle of these is that we're like, you can see how really emotionally revealing a lot of these questions are, right? And you can see how, not necessarily that you haven't changed, because I hope we're, you know, I think what I like is like, here's another question, right? Did your parents save money or invest? How did you view these attitudes about money as a child? I mean, do most children know the depths of their parents' investments and what they think? But I think it can be very helpful in the sense that you start talking about it from your own view. So one makes the presumption, and I think you should be thinking actively about that in your date, is did their parents invest or save? But more importantly than whether their parents invested or saved is what you think, what the person you're thinking about getting into a relationship has to say about investing. So
well, how did these experiences shape them? And also, not only as much what your experiences with your parents were about money, but how did they feel about money? Like I remember from my mom just getting this fear of not having enough money, just this permeating sense of fear throughout the house.
Right, and very interesting. And surely that shaped your own perception.
It did for a long time.
Right.
It did for a long time.
And so, you know, I think when you're on date 4 talking about money, the most important thing isn't about whether the parents saved. It's what did the kid think? What did the person you're talking to think? Like for me, my parents invested. They were consistently putting away for their retirement, and they'd invest in real estate. And then every so often, you know, like we would invest in a stock that came along. And so like, I remember at one point Corning Incorporated went down to $1.30 a share. And my dad was like, what can we sell to buy Corning stock right now? And so rather than buy a house, he just bought Corning shares, and like within a year they've gone from $1.30 to back up again to $7, and then they went from $7 to 40 something or something. I think they went.
I don't think the word stock market was ever even uttered in my home.
And so, you know, like I adapted like a pretty pro investment attitude, like especially as a young person. Before I think I really realized, like right now, I feel like I'm very anti-investment.
Depends on what you're investing in.
Yeah, but just, you know, like I think we should all be investing in planet Earth and making sure that planet Earth is healthy. So I invest in environmentally conscious stuff right now and nothing else, because not a big proponent of the global warming, but I am a big proponent that says almost every river and ocean is just fucking infested with microplastics, and whether that's changing the global temperature or not, no matter what side you're on, it's unarguable that microplastics have invaded everything everywhere, and we have to do something about this. We can't just keep ingesting microplastics, and I
you
think
can invest, or you can do conscious investing.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I turned out to be pretty pro. And these questions, I'm not so sure I quite understand. I guess it's more about how you spend money. But they ask a bunch of questions about: did you take family vacations or travel together?
Right.
How did you view vacations as a child? So I guess that's because in a relationship you view vacations as a major source of money expenditure, right?
Well, first of all, I want to say we talked about in another video about your level of emotional healing. So if you've gone through some bad experiences with money like I did in my family, if you haven't healed from those, then those triggers are going to come up when it's time to spend money on something that's maybe goes against what your family experiences were. But my family never went on vacations. I can remember one vacation in my entire life. But for the person who is more of a spender and let's live for the present moment and whatever, spending money on a vacation and having that experience that's going to last for a lifetime, that's something that's valuable to them. Somebody who's more of the accountant type like your mother might think that, to spend money on a vacation is, maybe not the best use of, it's a transient thing and it's going to be over, and instead we could buy this house or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that was maybe what you'd expect, but actually my mother was very pro. She really looked forward to vacations.
Mm-hmm. So her maternal part of it and the family thing was
go.
more important. But whatever you hold as valuable is how you're going to look at spending money as well.
Yeah, that's very true. And they ask if you entertained as a child, which I suppose is, again, relative to whether you view
I got some negative answers on all this.
Whether you view spending money socializing as and then finally they get past your parents and your grandparents, and you can start asking questions like, what is your own work history? How do you view work?
So they're tying in this date, work and money. I did this process with a potential life partner. We're both retired, so we didn't spend any time on the work part. We spent all the time on the money part. But, work and money are intrinsically tied, but it adds another element because of the time, Some people might be so anxious about the money that feeling like they have to accumulate so much money and feel secure that they're willing to trade their time and to trade their mental and emotional health in the present to get that money. So,
and obviously where the majority of the population is trading time for money.
Yeah.
Time for money.
Yeah.
And that's
they even say time is money.
Right. But you as a person, any investment guy you ever will listen to will say, oh, you want to grow your wealth to the point where you're no longer trading your time for money. You want to grow your wealth to the place where you're getting money from investments. It's not your time that's invested.
But if you have two people now, the example that they gave in this chapter was a couple, and it was a male gay couple. And one of them, his father died at 43, worked himself to death kind of, and then he died, and he wasn't able to spend and enjoy the money that he had earned. And then there was another guy in the couple whose father lost his job, I think was the situation, and then they had no money. He hadn't saved up anything, and so one was a real saver and the other was a real spender because of their past experiences. And if you don't know this about your partner and they deny that purchase, or they want to save the money that you inherited or something like that, you're going to possibly have a big argument about that. But once you understand this is his insecurity about money because, life is short and you can die and not be able to use any of it.
Yeah.
Or you can, be almost thrown out of your house because you didn't save any, then you start to understand the reasons and the emotions and behind, their position.
And how you might get balance.
Right, and have more compassion and then say, okay, how can we come together instead of just arguing?
So, next question is, what does money mean to you personally and why? And I think this is probably the best question so far.
It's a really good question, and definitely a question that people should ask, and most of the time
the
don't.
most direct.
Yeah.
The others, you should still be finding out a lot of information, but the questions are indirect, so you're finding out whether somebody agrees with the decisions that their grandparents and parents made, and they're telling you their philosophy indirectly. And so, in a way, you could expect an honest answer because it's abstract,
For me, the most important thing about money is the freedom. So you have freedom of choice. You have freedom to do or not do something. And it just allows you to express your individuality, to the fullest extent. Like if you have money and you don't feel like, packing up all your stuff when you want to move, you can pay somebody to do that. If you have money to buy a house and pay it off, then you have the freedom to, not have to pay rent and therefore have the freedom to do with your time as you wish. You have the freedom to buy the right tools to help you be more creative or help you do your job better. You have the freedom to take vacations and have experiences with your loved ones. You have the freedom to be generous with others. To me, it's more, that's kind of a security thing. The security to have the freedom.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, for me, I've had radical changes in how I view money. So this last decade has sort of dramatically changed how I think about money, and what it means to me has changed enormously. Couldn't maybe change more. So sort of starting out as a business person under the tutelage of my parents, under the guidance, support, I looked at money like a scorecard and looked at it like how much I made every year was like a scorecard for myself, almost like a golf score, right? Like I looked at money like how much I earned last year said something about me in terms of how well I navigated life, right? Or how well I saw things, or how smart I was. And I had it connected to a lot of those things. And then as I started to get older, I started to look at it. I started getting in my 20s at least, and I started to look at it like, oh, this is my path to freedom and a way to have investments that allow me not to have to work every day in order to be able to do it. And I looked at it like it was a tool, I think very similar to what you were talking about. And then I think through the trauma of my recent experiences in life, being dominated by billionaires, I came to see it as a tool of oppression and a way that we are supporting a tyranny that none of us want. And I've started to view money much more like the less I can use and the less I can engage with it, and the more that I can create for myself, the less I need to be engaging with this weapon.
So that's freedom too.
Yeah, I suppose.
Freedom from that system.
Yeah, freedom from that system. Yeah. And I think, so it's changed a lot for me.
So I think we're different than most people. I think a lot of people would say security, and a lot of people would say status.
Yeah, status, yeah. But, I don't know, I think it's kind of like fool's gold. It's like, what are you chasing?
Well, and you can call it money or you can call it resources. If you called it resources, then it might be a slightly different answer.
So this next question I find odd to be in here, but there must be some reason. Did your parents celebrate your birthdays? And did you feel special? I presume.
Well, yeah, it's a strange question, but it's kind kind of more like they could say birthdays and Christmas. You know, did you get, you know, decent presents, or was it, you know?
Yeah, you think that's what it?
I think that's part of it, and just celebrating you.
But I don't understand what this has to do with the. I can see it as a general scope of how you are in the world, but I don't necessarily understand its relationship to money.
Well, were your parents generous with you? I think should have been a better question.
Yeah, maybe because like my parents always made a very big deal out of my birthday.
You were an only child, right?
I have a little brother.
Oh.
8 years older. And we made a big deal of everybody's birthday, right? And definitely, you know, like from my father more so than for myself. My dad was obsessed on some subtle level with how much money got spent on his birthday present. That was a big deal for him. So, like, if you bought him something small and it wasn't very valuable, he'd definitely be upset.
You bought him a cheap present. You did not value him.
Super connection between the cost.
Well, that kind of fits the birthday thing then.
Yeah, super connection between those two things. And as I got older, which I think, again, this is the part that
diamond rings all the way.
It doesn't matter whether my dad. So the thing that I just hope to convey to everybody, from my viewpoint of your strategy going into date 4, is it doesn't fucking matter what my dad thought about the relationship between the cost of a present and how much you loved him and cared for him. What matters is, what did I take away from that? And like Jan says, you often go in two directions. You either think the same thing or you probably think the exact opposite. So in all those questions, you should be thinking to find out what is it that they are, what do they think about it now? What's their view of that now? And that's who you're dealing with, not my father. You're not dealing with that guy's father. But you do need to understand what he dealt with so that you can understand how he has grown and now what he thinks based on his own experiences.
And
like
two people can have the same experience and take away two separate meanings from it, two completely different meanings.
Totally, right. And did you have a birthday cake?
Yeah, we can skip that.
How did your parents show you that they were proud of you, or didn't they? So,
there was a certain amount of recognition, I think. But I think I was one of those kids where it didn't matter if you were an A+ student, you know, straight A's and stuff. You know, they were like, yeah, that was good, you know, but it was like, it didn't seem like the praise fit the effort, you know. Seems like I could have been a C student in another household and gotten that same thing, so why did I work so hard? It was an internal workaholic kind of thing that I think I got from my father.
Yeah, no, very similar in my case. My parents almost never gave any praise at all. No,
Ouch.
never. Because just total overachievers, super push to overachieve, try to get.
So if I give him any praise, he's going to slack off, so yeah.
Well, I just don't think they gave themselves appreciation.
Right,
I don't think they had their own appreciation practice. And so that last part, see, that should tell you something, right? So the last part there is the most important for you, which is, again, it doesn't matter what my parents did. It matters what my perception of it is, because that's who you're going to be dealing with. It matters what your partner's perception is of what their parents did.
Right, and are you going to be over-seeking praise from your partner? And is it never going to be enough because it wasn't enough when you're, you know, if you're unhealed from your childhood,
right,
then, you know, you're going to be seeking things from your partner that are extraordinary and unfair, maybe. Another
great question. What did your parents teach you about money?
You know, I wish they would have taught. In general, I wish people would learn more about money. We don't learn about it in school, and I think there's a premeditated reason for that. I don't think they want the working class to, you know,
of course,
rise above and know the things that the elites know about making money. But I can't say I got any valuable information about money other than just save and stuff like that. I will say here, though, that there was one experience that I think caused me not to feel like saving was such a valuable thing. It was after my father left, and after, months or years or whatever, when my mom got in a really tight situation and, didn't have money for food and all kinds of stuff. Me and my sister had saved, when my father was there, he would often give us silver dollars, this is how old I am, for our allowance. And I thought they were beautiful. It was real silver. It was, and whatever. We had this little black shiny purse, and we were taught to save, so we would save our money in that purse.
Nice.
And we never spent those silver dollars. And I probably had 30 to 50 of them.
Nice.
And my mom came to us, and I could tell she was, really ashamed to have to do this, and asked to borrow both mine and my sister's money. And she said she would pay it back, and so we loaned her the money. And it probably was a year, it seemed like forever, that she paid us back, and she paid us back in bills. So it was during the time when you couldn't have silver anymore.
Oh.
That Nixon thing, and it was illegal to have, you had to turn in all your gold and silver and stuff. And so I felt like I gave her something valuable, and she gave me something back that, it was my recognition, my intuition as a child that fiat money wasn't shit.
Right.
Oh. Somehow intuitively I knew that what she paid me back with wasn't as valuable as what I gave her.
Very interesting.
And I think that shaped my feeling about saving. And I've had experiences in my life where I have saved up money and something has happened that took it all away out of my control. And so I think that contributed to that too. But I've never been a good saver.
But my parents gave me great education. My mom taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was probably
My mom taught me that
8.
too, but she was a teller at the bank.
And I helped her by the age of 13. I was helping her do the accounting for the business. And
Nice.
she'd show me how to categorize everything and how to classify it for deductions and the whole spiel. So I had this real sort of the finances of running a business I understood from a very early age. And then the investment side, my parents had they didn't have, in real estate, I guess, they had a very long-term view. So in real estate, they would, buy a house, renovate it, make it great, make it pay for itself, cash flow positive. And in most of the cases, they'd have the mortgages. They also subscribed to the idea that you always paid a double mortgage payment. So you never just paid one mortgage payment because that was for suckers, and you always paid 2 mortgage payments.
Wow, that's great advice.
So
Fucking great advice.
Both my mom and dad were very much about doubling mortgage payments, making sure you got it paid off, taking money off the principal, but only from that property. So they would never take money out of anything else. So I think one of those things that I really appreciated about them later in life is they would isolate investments. And so if they had a mortgage on Scott Avenue,
right,
then it was the Scott Avenue house that had to pay the mortgage off on Scott Avenue. It wasn't any other property. And they were very good like that. I think
that's smart.
Really gave me a great education, I think.
They don't have a lot of questions here about your relationship with money in past relationships, because that
That does seem more on point.
Well, all this stuff is super important, and your experiences when you're a child, shape your memories and your emotions and your triggers and stuff going forward. But also in past relationships. So anybody that's been in a past marriage or a past long-term relationship, and I can tell a story of my ex-husband who made a bunch of money before it was legal, growing pot. And I was the stay-at-home mom, and he would be out spending $1,000 a weekend entertaining his friends and leaving me at home with no car and hardly any food and 3 kids, 3 small children, you know, so an experience like that obviously shapes your
So real trauma.
your expectation of money, and that I'm never going to be left again where I don't have any of my own money. So one of the things that I negotiated in when I was doing the 8 dates with this potential life partner was that I don't mind, you know, if we get married, I don't mind combining the finances, even though I have the majority of the money coming in. I have no problem. We're in this together, whatever. But I think we each should have our own pot of money, our own. We'll have a joint account and we'll have 2 separate accounts. So that if I want to spend, you know, $1,700 on a Swedish guitar, which I have done in my life, that I can do that. If I have to save up the money or whatever, I can do that, and I don't have to ask your permission to do that.
And at the same time, you're not depleting the common
I'm
fund.
not depleting. You know, we're still paying all our expenses, and we're saving up and all that sort of thing. And
Sensible.
you can go spend money on your, you know, kite surfing and all that sort of thing. So it allows. I think it's a really nice combination that you get to be individuals in the relationship, but you also are a team, and you're working together, and you discuss your common goals financially.
And I think that's a great example of maybe to end with is just, you know, that you can always be creative, and like no matter what you find about in this date, my view at least, because I don't know, I think we have different views of things in this concept of relationships. My view is there's always a strategy to get both people's needs met. And so even if you hear something in a date that says, uh-oh, right? Like,
red flag.
This guy is saying, hey, I don't know if we're going to be alive tomorrow, so I want my last check to bounce, right? and you're thinking, Jesus, well, that's not the person I want to be in a long.
And that's going to run my credit, and I'm going to live 20 years longer.
Right, like just because that huge difference happens doesn't mean that they're not a compatible partner for you. You just have to build a strategy that makes sure you're protected and that you get what you need while still allowing them to be them. And maybe in time they're going to modify their agreement. So obviously you should never mess your finances with somebody who has such a completely different viewpoint. And it sounds like you should never get married, because they're going to affect your credit if you're both signing for the same properties. But maybe you could get married and still have different homes and different investments or
prenups. That's what that's about. I think we do both agree that almost anything can be negotiated. If you've got a good person, but you have strongly differing views on certain things, you can if you have good communication and if you have good intentions, you can negotiate almost anything. And that's part of what all of this is about. Is most people don't talk about these important topics until it's a crisis point. And you can talk about this stuff as adults ahead of time and make agreements.
Right. Create a path forward that doesn't make you have to sacrifice because of something that you see them doing that you don't approve of, or vice versa. And so I think it's a really essential element to be able to sort of say, okay, I get that vacations are really important to you. They're not important to me. I view them like a waste of money. You view them like they're an essential part of living life. So how are we going
Where can we meet in the middle?
Yeah, what feels okay to me? Like, what feels okay to you? And I think there's a perfectly reasonable.
And over time, that person might learn to love those vacations. You know?
Or
this other person might be happy about saving more.
Right. Yeah. And you complement each other, and as long as you can come up with a strategy, even if it takes weeks for you to come up with a strategy that makes you feel safe.
These might be uncomfortable and difficult decisions to have at first, but it's way better than having big, uncomfortable surprises.
Later. Right, because then you're already in it, and now they just spent $5,000 on
and emotionally draining
on tickets,
and damaging to the relationship, and damaging to your trust of the other person. Like all the hidden purchases that some couples make, and hidden debt and things like that. And you
Right.
definitely should disclose all of that stuff before you decide to have a long-term relationship together, whether married or not.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I think we really scratched the surface.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to find for yourself while you're doing this date 4. It's a big conversation.
Yeah.
It's a lot to talk
Yeah, and you
about.
can take more than one date, just like, you can take more than one date on that sex date. Some of us
Jan
took
took-
8 dates.
Jan
on
had
that one.
8 sex dates.
and agreed to go ongoing.
Yeah.
But open communication is the base of trust in a healthy relationship.
But also you have to think, like take the rose-colored glasses off, stop imagining everything's going to work out, and doesn't mean you should stop appreciating the wonderful qualities that you found, but you should be a realist about the qualities that you don't appreciate and
Right.
that don't meet your needs, and make sure that you've found a strategy, some way to articulate what your needs are, and then 2, how staying with this person through this relationship can continue to meet that need for you, and not just sacrifice your needs for the benefit of trying to
Right. And
make the
knowing what you
relationship
want will
work.
help you choose well. Choosing well is super important.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
good luck. Good luck. I hope your date goes great, and write us down. Tell us about it. Either an email or
Comments, likes,
comments, yeah.
subscribes, we want it all.
Yeah, or if you don't feel safe, like we get often, people write emails because it's more private. It's
Yeah.
out there for
Yeah.
everybody
That's true.
to see. But we'd love to hear, and,
Yep.
and thanks a lot.
We appreciate you.
Good luck.
Bye.